Only a few decades ago, if you wanted to practice good science, the only thing you needed to do was publish regular papers in academic journals, attend conferences, and give talks. However, in the bright new 21st century, this is very far from the truth. And you need to consider a couple of facts when you think about how you show your research to the public and the scientific community. The most important of which is that the number of academic papers that get published every year is experiencing an exponential rise. So in this forest of information overload, how can you make sure that it's your research that people will recognize, read, and learn about, perhaps even continue? Well, there's a simple answer to this. Open science. Because so few researchers have entered into this realm, it's the perfect time for you to embrace it. Open science assumes a couple of things. The first of which is that you publish your papers in an accessible way, in freely available online repositories, of course, if your academic journal agrees with this practice after an embargo period, but also to make sure that the data sets you use from your experimental measurements or numerical research are freely available online. Not only on your website, not only via email, but within online, freely accessible databases. So when a researcher looks for your paper, they can not only check its accuracy and reliability, they can look at your dataset immediately and continue research. But not only that, nowadays lots of databases have the functionality of, if you define your dataset very accurately, people can search for it, they can find it, and through this dataset that they need, they will find your work as well. And of course, this doesn't only make reaching your research easier, it also makes life easier for you, because you don't have to think about, where do I store my data? How do I make sure that it's still there 5 years later when I'm not in this position anymore? So these are things that are definitely very useful, but also what comes with open science practices is exposure. And new impact metrics, such as Altmetrics, that might gather information on how many times your paper has been referenced in a Wikipedia article, or how many times somebody has shared it on Twitter, or how many times a journalist has used it for a general public article. These are very important for modern society. And nowadays, even academic publishing practices have begun to change. And by having an interesting tidbit in your CV that has, for example, a hyperlink to your research online with all the databases, all the references, all the papers in full, this makes the job much easier for a hiring committee. Within thousands of potential applicants, you'll be the one that has all their ducks in a row, all their databases available, and who has been talked about online. Perhaps in Wikipedia, perhaps in a different type of media, such as TV or an online news portal. And as much as we don't want to admit it, oftentimes university hiring practices rely on getting the people who will increase the reputation of the institution. The better the name of the person getting there, the higher the chances of them getting funding and/or media exposure. So by practicing open science, you're already putting yourself out there as somebody who can act as a representative of a research institution. And that's a really prestigious position to be in. And of course, you can then share your work with others. So it's not just about publishing openly and accessibly for people who might not have access to a journal that you want to publish in. This is more about putting your name out there and getting your research what we do now call exposure. And I'm not going to go so far to call some open science academic influencers, but some really are. If there was ever a good way to make sure your research reaches not just the periphery of the academic community, but also the general public, the media, and your potential future employers. It's open science, definitely. Not just for the integrity and quality of your work, but for the success of your career as well.